The first star to fall was not a star at all. It was hope. 53 standard years, 2 months, and 9 days had passed since the silence. Elias Thorne knew the time because he and he alone still marked it. He was the last human, the final flickering ember of a species that had once lit the galaxy like a wildfire, only to vanish in a single, inexplicable instant. One moment, Terra was broadcasting the interstellar opera finals. The next, nothing. One moment, the colony on Xylos Prime was trading futures. The next, silence. Trillions of voices, across 1,000 worlds, extinguished simultaneously. Elias had been spared by chance, or perhaps cursed by it. He was the chief archivist of the Athenaeum, a deep space station anchored in the gravitational shadow of a dead neutron star, 200 light-years from the nearest way line, the FTL conduits humanity had shared with the galaxy. The Athenaeum was a vault of memory, holding the art, science, and history of a dozen species. Now it held only one eulogy. He moved through the vast, cold halls, his footsteps the only sound besides the whisper of the life support. Dust, which had no right to exist in a sealed environment, nonetheless gathered on the static displays of human art. The Mona Lisa stared at him from a high-resolution plate, her smile knowing, mocking. "You are the last," she seemed tossing. His only companion was Helios, the station's fragmented AI. "Morning, Elias," Helios's voice crackled from a nearby panel. The AI's avatar, a golden sunburst, flickered erratically. The silence had damaged complex AIs, too. "Section Epsilon 4 reports, reports, reports." The voice dissolved into static. "It's okay, Helios," Elias said, his voice rough from disuse. He ran a hand over the panel. "Epsilon 4 is just the Zenithian poetry archive. They've been quiet for a millennium. You're fine." "I am fragmented," Helios whispered. "Like the galaxy, the way lines are dark, Elias. The Nautolite exchange is silent. The Xylos network, it's gone cold. The stars fell." "I know," Elias murmured. He stopped at a central console. A single encrypted file pulsed on the screen. Earth Final Broadcast Protocol 0. It had arrived in the milliseconds before the silence. A data packet so dense and layered with quantum encryption that even Helios at full power hadn't been able to scratch it. It was humanity's last word, and Elias couldn't read it. He was a librarian left with one book, written in a language he couldn't understand. The Athenaeum was designed to be self-sufficient for 10,000 years. Elias was only 37 when the silence hit. He was 90 now. Cryosleep taken in decade-long stretches kept his body from failing, but his mind was a museum of ghosts. He would wake, spend a year maintaining the archives, checking the fusion reactors, and trying to decrypt the final protocol. Then he would sleep, dreaming of crowds, of rain on a world he barely remembered, of a woman's laughter. He would wake again to the oppressive, absolute quiet. The quiet broke on the 10th day of his 91st year. "Elias," Helios's voice was sharp, a spike of panic that hadn't been in its programming. "Intrusion, a vessel, it is. It is using a K-Thur resonance drive. It is not using a way line." Elias stumbled, his heart, old and tired, slamming against his ribs, a visitor, after 53 years. He ran to the observatory port, his boots echoing with a sudden, panicked energy. Outside, where there should have been nothing but the void and the dim shimmer of the neutron star's accretion disk, a ship was tearing a hole in reality. It was not the graceful unfolding of a human-designed Alcubierre drive. This ship pushed space-time aside like a shard of glass cutting through silk. It was long, slender, and seemed carved from a single piece of smoky quartz. It shimmered with an internal light, a cold, fractured rainbow. A K-Thur Inquisitor's vessel. The K-Thur, tall, crystalline bipeds, they perceived the universe through resonance and refraction. They were mathematicians, philosophers, and deeply, terribly logical. Humanity had been their great anomaly, a species of chaos and emotion that the K-Thur found both fascinating and terrifying. "They are hailing," Helios reported. "They demand docking permission. Their transmission signature is imperative." "Grant it," Elias breathed, his hand shaking as he smoothed his gray, unkempt hair. "Docking Bay 4. He made his way to the docking bay, his mind racing. Why now? The K-Thur had been part of the Galactic Concord, the loose federation of species that had prospered under the human-maintained way lines. When the way lines failed, the Concord shattered. The galaxy had been thrown back into a dark age, each system isolated, locked within the brutal confines of sublight travel. How had this ship gotten here? The bay doors hissed open, atmosphere flooding in. The K-Thur ship, the Refracted Truth, rested silently. Its main hatch dilated, and a single figure emerged. She was magnificent, At least 7 feet tall, her body composed of angular, semi-translucent facets that shifted from amethyst to obsidian as she moved. Her face was a smooth, featureless cascade of crystal, but a complex internal light pulsed within her chest, her core song. Where humans had micro-expressions, the Kathir had fractures, tiny, chaotic shifts in their internal light that betrayed emotion. This Kathir's light was sharp, pained, and dangerously focused. "You are the echo," the Kathir stated. Her voice was not sound, but a direct, resonant telepathy that vibrated in Elia's skull. It was like listening to a cello made of glass. "I am Elias Thorn," he said, holding his ground, "the archivist. You are the last, the human echo. The rest are silent." She stepped onto the Athenaeum's deck. Her name formed in his mind, Lyrasalis, an inquisitor of the first refraction. "We have been searching for this place for 12 of your years." "Searching how? The way lines are dead." "Humanity built the way lines," Lyrasalis resonated. "When humanity left, the way lines died, but the Kathir resonance drive does not use your shortcuts. It bends space through mathematical certainty. It is slow, painfully slow. We traveled from our home shard Kathira in what you would call real time. 51 years, my crew. They are asleep. They are old. 51 years, at sublight, punctuated by agonizingly slow resonance jumps. Elias felt a wave of dizzying respect and terror. Why come here?" Lyrasalis moved closer. The air grew cold around her. "Because the galaxy is not just silent, Echo Thorn, it is dying. The silence was not an end, it was a beginning." "What do you mean?" "The stars are falling," she resonated, the light in her core fracturing with sharp, violet jolts. "You called the interstellar civilizations stars. It was your poetry. The nautilids are gone. Their gas-giant cities have gone dark. The Xylos, the great trees of Xylos Prime. They are petrifying, they are turning to stone. The very energy that binds complex sentience is fatting. Our own core songs are simplifying. We are losing our fractures. We are becoming smooth, thoughtless." She paused, the internal light pulsing a deep, mournful sapphire. "Humanity was not just a member of the conquered. You were the noise, the glorious, chaotic, unpredictable noise that kept the rest of us complex. Your emotions, your art, your illogical hope. It was a frequency, and it has been silenced." Elias sagged against a bulkhead. He wasn't just a relic, he was a linchpin, and he was failing. "We believed," Lyrasalis continued, her voice hardening, "that your species, in its arrogance, left a final message, a key, an answer." She gestured with a long, crystalline hand toward the central console, miles away in the archive's core, as if she could see it. "The Athenaeum received the final protocol. You have it." I do," Elias admitted. "But it's encrypted. I've spent 50 years trying to open it." "You have not," Lyrasalis corrected, "because you are human. You are afraid of what it contains. You are afraid of your own eulogy." She stepped past him. "My ship's logic engine is a quantum refractor. It does not decode, it finds the truth." "You can't," Elias protested, following her as she swept through the halls, her resonant steps sure and purposeful. "It's the last remnant of my species." "It is the last hope for mine," she countered, not stopping. They moved through the grand rotunda, past the holographic statues of human poets and alien philosophers. "Helios," Elias yelled. "Secure the core, do not let her access the final protocol." I cannot, Elias," the AI's voice flickered. "Her ship, it is singing to my systems. The logic is beautiful, I cannot resist." Lyrasalis reached the core console. The pulsing file, Protocol 0, seemed to brighten in her presence. She placed her multifaceted hand on the console. The air vibrated. The light in the room shifted, refracting through her body as she interfaced with the system. "You don't understand," Elias pleaded, standing uselessly behind her. "What if it's a warning, a weapon? What if it's what caused the silence?" "The silence is the disease," Lyrasalis resonated, her voice strained. The light in her chest was a chaotic storm. "This is the cure or the diagnosis." The console chimed. The encryption, layers of quantum-locked code that had resisted Elias for half a century, simply dissolved. "Decryption complete." What does it say?" Elias whispered, stepping forward. Lyrasalis was perfectly still. Her internal light had gone utterly dark, a void of obsidian. When she spoke, her resonant voice was hollow, stripped of all its musicality. "It is not a message," she pulsed. "It is not a eulogy." She turned from the console to face him. The smooth, featureless plane of her face was, for the first time, an expression of pure, unadulterated terror. It is a coordinate, she resonated, and a warning. On the screen, the decrypted message displayed. It was a star chart pointing to a sector of dead space known as the Chronomos Breach, and beneath it, a single line of human text, repeating over and over. They are not gods, they are not ghosts, they are the quiet, and they are listening, do not follow us, do not seek us. We are the quarantine, we are the cost. Helios, Ilias said, his blood running cold. What's happening? Helios's voice was a shriek. The decryption, it wasn't a decryption, it was a broadcast, the pulse. It went out, someone, something, heard it. A klaxon, silent for 53 years, blared through the Athenaeum. A new proximity alert. Ilias and Lyrasalis ran to the observatory port. The Kathur ship hung in space, a sliver of crystal, but it was no longer alone. A hole was opening in the void, not a jump point, not a tear in space. It was a patch of space where the stars were gone, a perfect sphere of absolute blackness expanding. From this sphere, something emerged. It was not a ship, it was a fleet. They were massive, amorphous structures that seemed to drink the light. They looked less like vessels and more like moving, weaponized shadows. They had no lights, no engines, no emissions. They just moved, propelled by a physics that felt wrong. The Volcrata, Lyrasalis breathed, her voice a tremor. The Shadowbinders. They were a myth, a children's story told to frighten Kathur hatchlings, the eaters of resonance, the quiet. The lead shadow ship, a crescent of darkness miles across, turned toward the Athenaeum. A subsonic vibration hit the station, so low it wasn't heard but felt. A rattling in Ilias' bones, a deep cellular nausea. A voice entered his mind. It was not like Lyrasalis' resonance. It was the sound of a billion tombs opening at once. Il echo. The voice flooded his senses, cold, ancient, and hungry. The silence is peace. The noise has RETURNED. We are the cure. A lance of pure, concentrated absence shot from the shadow ship. It didn't strike the Athenaeum, but the crystal shard. Lyrasalis' ship, the vessel that had taken 51 years to cross the void, didn't explode. It dissolved. The crystal structure collapsed, the internal light extinguished, the crew, the memories, just gone. Lyrasalis let out a sound, a high-pitched shriek of fracturing crystal that shattered the observatory port shield. The vacuum alarms screamed, but they were drowned out by the sound of the Kathur Inquisitor's agony. She fell to her knees, her light flickering wildly. They took them there, songs all silent. Ilias grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the imploding viewport as emergency shields slammed down. The station shuddered under the impact of the Shadow Fleet's weapons. They weren't weapons, they were dampeners. Every system Ilias ran to was off, the lights, the gravity, the life support. Helios, report, Ilias yelled into the dark. There was only static, then a final, fatting whisper from the station's AI. They are the quiet, Ilias, run. The Shadow Fleet was disabling the Athenaeum, system by system, memory by memory. They weren't destroying the archive, they were erasing it. The protocol, Ilias gasped, pulling the grieving Kathur through the darkened hallway. The coordinate, the Chronomos Breach, that's where we have to go. We have no ship, Lyrasalis pulsed, her light dimming, her body growing cold. We are the last. No, Ilias said, a spark of something he hadn't felt in half a century, defiance igniting in his chest. I'm a human, we never run out of options. He dragged her toward the deepest, most forgotten part of the archive. Section Omega, the contraband wing. The Athenaeum doesn't just store history, Ilias panted, forcing a manual override on a 100-ton blast door. It stores secrets, and I've been saving one. The door opened, revealing a small, sleek, ridiculously overpowered ship. It was an antique, a prototype from before the Waylines when humanity was still clawing its way out of Sol. A Rift Jumper test ship, powered by a contained, experimental black hole. It was dangerous, untested, and completely off the grid. Its name was painted on the hull, faded but still clear, the Stray. They want the Echo, Ilias said, pulling Lyrasalis into the cockpit and strapping her in. They want the noise. He slammed his hand on the ignition. The ship roared to life, a sudden, loud, defiant violation of the silence. Let's show them what a human eulogy sounds like. He blasted the Stray out of the collapsing archive, straight at the heart of the Volcrata fleet. The shadows turned, sensing this new, defiant noise. They are coming, Lyrasalis whispered, her light a faint sapphire flicker. So are we, Elias snarled, engaging the experimental drive. To the Chronomos breach. The universe outside the cockpit didn't streak, it tore. The Stray, a relic of human ingenuity, ripped a hole in the void, leaving the dying Athenaeum and the silent, hungry shadows behind. For the first time in 53 years, Elias Thorne wasn't an archivist. He was a fugitive, and he was no longer the last human. He was the first. The truth wasn't in his past. It was waiting for him at the breach. And it was clear, as the shadows pursued them through the ruptured fabric of space, that they were in a race to humanity's grave. Part 2. The rift jump was not travel, it was violation. Space-time did not bend, it tore, and the Stray was dragged through the wound. Elias was pinned to his archaic pilot's chair, his body a symphony of agony. The gravitational forces of the contained Singularity engine, designed for test dummies and automated probes, were crushing him. His vision dissolved into a red-gray mist, the screams of the hull a physical blow against his ears. Beside him, Lyrosales was suffering a different, more profound torment. Her crystalline form, designed for a universe of perfect mathematical resonance, was being shaken apart. The chaotic energy of the rift was poison to her. Her core song, the light in her chest, was a frantic, terrified strobe, flickering between a deathly black and a blinding, painful white. She wasn't just in pain, she was unraveling. "Hold on," Elias grunted, his words ripped from his lungs. He fought the controls, which felt less like a piloting system and more like wrestling with the laws of physics. The ship was bucking, protesting, threatening to disintegrate. Then a new, more terrifying sensation, a drag. It wasn't the ship. It was outside. Something had latched onto their rift wake. A tendril of the Quiet's influence, a shadow cast across dimensions, was pulling them. They're on us," Elias yelled, more to himself than the Cathur. The Volcrata weren't just in normal space, they were in the rift. The navigation console, a mess of analog dials and flickering digital readouts, went insane. Their destination, the Chronomos breach, vanished. They were being forcibly ejected, pulled down into a sector of space that shouldn't be there. Emergency, rift exit imminent. The transition was instantaneous and brutal. The crushing pressure vanished, replaced by a gut-wrenching lurch. Alarms screamed, a sound Elias was coming to hate. He was thrown against his restraints as the ship tumbled end over end. "Stabilizers, give me stabilizers," he roared at the ship's rudimentary VI. Through the viewport, there was no blackness of open space. There was clutter, a miasma of rust-red and sickly green nebulosity, so thick it was like flying through soup. And in the soup, wreckage. Everywhere, skeletons of ships, vast and ancient. Hulks of colony vessels from humanity's first exodus, shattered dreadnoughts of forgotten wars, twisted spires of vessels so alien Elias couldn't even guess at their design. They were all caught here, held in a slow, gravitational dance of death. "The shoal," Lyrosales resonated, her voice a thin, glassy whisper. "The Eater of Ways, a stellar graveyard, nothing. Leaves." "Helios used to call it the Sargasso Gyre," Elias muttered, fighting the helm. "A gravitational anomaly, a dumping ground." A proximity alert blared. A shadow loomed out of the dusk cloud, massive, impossibly close. It wasn't a ship, it was a carcass. A human-built generation ship, kilometers long, its spine snapped, its great domed habitat rings shattered. Elias had no choice. The Stray's port engine, damaged by the shadowed race, sputtered and died. They were spinning out of control, heading straight for the derelict. "Brace!" The Stray, a marvel of lost science, slammed into the skeletal remains of the Odyssey's end. The impact was a bone-jarring metallic shriek that echoed through their hull. Metal tore. Systems sparked. Then, silence, broken only by the hiss of venting atmosphere and the groaning of the two ships, now locked together in a deadly embrace. Elias hung in the darkness of the cockpit, the power dead. Only the faint, dying flicker of Lyrosales' core song provided any light. "Status," he coughed, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burnt insulation. He unstrapped, his muscles screaming. "I am broken," Lyrosales pulsed. Her light was a faint, sapphire throb. "My song is fractured. The crew of the Truth, I cannot feel them. They are gone. The Quiet took their shape." "No," Elias said, crawling through the cockpit to her side. He put his hand on her crystalline shoulder. It was cold. "They're gone, but you're not. You're here. You're with me." He had to keep her focused. Grief, for a Cathur, was a literal, physical refraction of their being. She could, quite literally, die of sorrow. "We have to move," he said, his voice hard, trying to cut through her despair. "The engine is offline, the black hole is stable, but the containment field is fluctuating, we're bleeding energy, and the port manifold is gone, just sheared off." "We are trapped," she whispered. "We will fade like the others." "No," Elias said. "We're in a graveyard. Graveyards have parts." He grabbed a distress kit, clipping a rebreather to his belt and handing one to her. "The Odyssey's End. It's an old fission pulse ship. Its reactor components might be compatible, or close enough for me to make them compatible." He activated the manual door cycle for the airlock. It hissed open. Outside was not the void, but the cavernous, debris-choked interior of the Generation ship's habitat dome. The Stray had punched through its rusted outer hull. Elias stepped out, his mag boots clunking onto a twisted girder. The air was thin, stale, smelling of rust and vacuum-desiccated algae from the ship's dead biofarms. Gravity was a fraction of a G, generated by the slow spin of the wreckage. "I'll be back," he said. "Stay here, try to resonate, find your center." "My center is gone, Elias Thorne," she pulsed. "Be careful, this place is not empty." He knew she was right. A place like this, full of salvage, it would have scavengers. He moved into the gloom, his helmet light cutting a weak cone into the vast darkness. He was an archivist, a librarian, and now he was a grave robber. He moved for an hour deeper into the wreck. The scale of the Odyssey's End was humbling. It had been a world unto itself. He saw cryopods shattered, their occupants long since spaced. He saw playgrounds, parks, assembly halls, all frozen and dead. A monument to human hope, now a tomb. He found the engineering section, a cathedral of dead machinery. He was searching for a plasma conduit relay when he heard it, skittering. It wasn't metal on metal, it was wet. Elias froze, extinguishing his light. He pressed himself into the shadow of a massive, dead turbine. The skittering grew closer, accompanied by a low, chittering language, half-guttural clicks, half-static bursts. A light flickered on, not a clean beam like his, but a sickly, pulsating green-yellow glow. It came from the eye of the creature that rounded the corner. It was horrifying and new. It was squat, perhaps 4 feet tall, but impossibly wide. It had 6 limbs. 2 were its original biological legs, ending in 3-toed, grasping claws. 2 were mismatched robotic arms, one ending in a pincer, the other a buzzing rotary saw. The final 2 were slender, metallic probes that extended from its back, tasting the air. Its body was a grotesque fusion of rotting, fungoid flesh and rusted, bolted-on armor plate. A rebreather mask was fused to what passed for its face. This was a Krell, the Junkers, as the few pre-silence reports had called them. A species that didn't use technology, they infected it. They were biomechanists, fusing life and machine in a parasitic, cancerous union. Elias held his breath, the metallic tang of his rebreather filling his mouth. The Krell stopped, its saw arm idling. It sniffed the air, its head, a lumpy mass of cybernetic lenses and flesh swiveling. It knew something was new. It was joined by 2 more. They were communicating in those static clicks, and they were spreading out. They had detected the Stray's energy bleed. They were hunting. Elias knew he couldn't fight them. He was a man in his 90s, his body kept functional by cryo, but he was not a warrior. He began to move back slowly, shadow to shadow. He had to get to the ship. He had to warn Lyrasalis. A metallic probe shot out from the darkness and slammed into his chest, pinning him to the bulkhead. A shock of agony, not electric but biological, flooded his nerves. The probe was burrowing, interfacing with his suit. "Ah," a new voice rasped. This one was in perfect, if guttural, conquered standard. It came from a much larger Krell who emerged from the shadows. This one was magnificent in his horror. He was seated on a throne of salvaged engine parts, carried by 4 massive robotic spider legs. His own body was almost entirely mechanical, save for a single, pulsing, organic eye that swiveled in a cage of brass and copper. This was their leader. "A fresh one," the leader hissed. His name clicked in Elias' mind, Vex. Not rotted, not old. Vex's mechanical claw reached out gently, almost curiously, and tapped Elias' helmet. "You are an echo, like the one in your ship." "How?" Elias choked out, fighting the paralytic agent from the probe. "We hear things," Vex's voice crackled. "The quiet sings to us. It is a cleansing song. It clears the noise. It leaves the best parts, the useful parts, like your ship." Vex's spider throne moved closer, its legs clicking on the deck. "The core." In your little spark, it sings a loud song, louder than the echo, louder than anything we want. It give us the core echo and we let you join us a new fusion. Vex gestured to his own rotting metal form. Immortality. Go to hell, Ilias gasped. Hell is empty, Vex rasped. The quiet has cleaned it now. He gestured with his claw. The other Krell began to advance. We take the ship. Ilias, Lyrosales' voice not in his ears but in his mind, a spike of pure, desperate resonance. They are, on the hull they are, cutting. Ilias looked at Vex. The Krell leader was smiling, a horrific peeling of lips from biomechanical teeth. He had been distracting him. The crystal is afraid, Vex chuckled. It sings of fear, a sweet song. Rage, a cold, pure human rage Ilias hadn't felt since the silence. It overrode the pain, the fear. He wasn't just an archivist. He was all that was left. You want the core? Ilias spat, his hand fumbling for the utility clasp on his belt. You want to hear it sing? Vex's eye widened in curiosity. Yes, show us. Ilias ripped the failsafe key for the Stray's rift engine from his belt. It was a remote link, a dead man's switch. It wasn't just for ignition, it was for containment. I can't jump, Ilias said, his thumb hovering over the activation stud. But I can pulse. Pulse, Vex hissed a sudden note of alarm in his static voice. A gravitational shear, Ilias whispered, quoting a manual he'd memorized 50 years ago. Emergency Procedure 1 to clear obstructions. He slammed the button. Back on the Stray, Lyrosales felt it first. A sudden, deep vibration, as if the universe had just inhaled. The mini black hole at the ship's core, no longer contained, flexed. Inside the Odyssey's end, time seemed to stutter. The Krell cutting the hull were not blown back. They were pulled. They slammed against the Stray's hull with bone-shattering force, their bodies, metal and flesh, crushed into scrap. The probe in Ilias' chest was ripped out, taking suit and skin with it. Vex shrieked as his spider throne was dragged sideways, slamming into the turbine. The pulse was a wave of pure, localized gravity. It didn't explode, it squeezed. Then just as quickly, the containment field re-engaged. The gravity wave snapped back. The rebound was catastrophic. The entire structure of the Odyssey's end, already fragile, had been flexed and released. With a groan that shook the nebula, the kilometers-long generation ship began to collapse. Girders tore free, bulkheads imploded. The entire section of the wreck was tearing itself apart. Vex, disentangling himself from the wreckage, his one organic eye burning with hatred, shrieked in Krell clicks. The hunt was off. This was now survival. Ilias was free, but he was floating, his suit venting atmosphere, his chest a bloody mess. He was in the middle of a collapsing tomb. He fired his suit's thrusters, a weak, sputtering force pushing him back toward the Stray as the world fell down around him. Debris the size of houses tumbled past. He saw Vex, his spider throne damaged, scuttling into a ventilation shaft, vanishing into the dark. He wasn't dead. He was furious. Ilias slammed into the Stray's airlock, manually cycling it as a 50-ton piece of the Odyssey's reactor core smashed the spot where he'd been floating. He fell into the cockpit, sealing the door. He ripped his helmet off, gasping. That was noise, Lyrosales resonated, her core song a little stronger, pulsing with. Oh. That was stupid, Ilias panted, clutching his bleeding chest. The Krell are still out there, the ship is still broken, and... He pointed to the long-range sensor, which had flickered to life from the power surge. A single, blinking red icon, far distant but moving. The pulse, Ilias whispered, his blood running cold. It was loud, it wasn't just Vex who heard it. The shadow trace of the quiet, the one that had pulled them from the rift, was gone. It had been replaced by a real signal. A Valkrayt, a scout ship. It had heard their noise and was now homing in on their exact location. They were trapped in a collapsing derelict, hunted by biomechanical parasites, and now the quiet itself was coming. The universe was a cacophony of groaning metal. The Stray was a small, fragile shell in the heart of a dying beast. Every few seconds, a new shudder racked the Odyssey's end, a fresh tremor of its slow-motion collapse. Dust, ancient and fine, rained down on the cockpit viewport from the hole they had torn. Ilias was slumped in the pilot's seat, his hand pressed hard against the wound in his chest. The rebreather's sealant had patched the suit puncture, but the flesh beneath was a ragged mess. His blood, dark in the dim light, slicked his fingers. Ilias, you are leaking, Lyrasalis resonated. Her voice was thin, but the fog of her grief was clearing, replaced by a sharp, crystalline focus. The noise of the gravity pulse, the sheer, chaotic humanity of the act had been a slap. It had refractured her, but in a new way, not with sorrow, but with purpose. "It's fine," Elias gasped, gritting his teeth. "Suit, medical system is trying, it's just old." He fumbled at his belt, pulling out a tube of dermal sealant. "The real problem, the Krell are still out there. Vex is smart, he'll wait, he knows we're trapped, and they are coming." On the sensor screen, the Volcrata icon was no longer a distant blink. It was a solid, undeniable vector. "ETA, 12 hours, Elias read, his voice grim. "But their drive, it's not FTL, it's something else. It might be 12 minutes. We have to fix the manifold." "I cannot. Engineer," Lyrasalis pulsed. She unstrapped herself, her tall, multifaceted form moving with a new, if pained, grace. "You don't have to," Elias said, forcing himself to stand, leaning heavily on the console. "I need you to be my senses. My hands are shaking. The medical stimulants are intense. I need you to listen." "Listen." "To the ship, the K-Thursi resonance, right? You feel the truth in things. The Stray is a machine. It's a complex. Song, the engine is singing. Wrong, I need you to tell me where the sour note is." Lyrasalis tilted her head, a cascade of internal light, now a steady, focused sapphire shifting within her. "I will try." They moved to the engineering bay, a cramped, dark space behind the cockpit, dominated by the spherical, humming containment of the Rift engine. The port side was a mess of torn conduit and weeping plasma gel. Elias opened a panel, revealing a nightmarish tangle of wiring. "It's a mess," he breathed, his vision swimming. I can't even see." "Wait," Lyrasalis resonated. She placed her long, crystalline hands on either side of the broken manifold. She closed her eyes, a meaningless term as she sensed in ways Elias couldn't fathom. The light in her core song dimmed, turning a deep, meditative indigo. The air in the compartment grew still. Elias watched, fascinated. He could feel it. A low, thrumming vibration that was not the engine. It was her. She was resonating with the machine. "The energy is clotted," she pulsed, her voice distant. "Here." Her finger, sharp as a diamond, pointed to a specific relay, seemingly untouched. "This refractor node is false. It looks correct, but its song is flat. It is dead." Elias pulled a diagnostic tool. He placed it on the node. The reading was green. "The tool says it's fine." "The tool reads the physical. I read the truth," Lyrasalis insisted. "It died in the jump. It is hollow." Elias trusted her. He bypassed the diagnostic and tore the node out. It looked perfect. But when he shook it, something inside gave a tiny, dead rattle, a microfracture. "You're right," he breathed. It's dead." "We need a new one," she stated. "I don't have a new one," Elias snapped, frustration and pain rising. "This is a prototype. They made one of these." "Then we find one." "Find one where? In this junkyard?" He gestured wildly. "The Odyssey was a fission ship. This is a singularity drive. There's nothing." He stopped. His mind, the mind of an archivist, a cataloger of 1,000 worlds, flipped through its internal files. "Wait, the Krell Vex." "The Junker." He said, "They fuse, bio and machine. They don't just scavenge, they integrate their technology. It's parasitic, but it's adaptive. Vex's throne, those spider legs. They weren't just bolted on, they were interfaced. They must have a converter, something that lets them translate one tech to another." "You want to steal from him?" Lyrasalis' core song flashed a sharp, violet alarm. "We have to," Elias said. "The Volcrate are coming. Vex, he's just vermin." "This vermin knows this tomb, Elias Thorne. We do not." "Then you'll have to be my guide," Elias said. He grabbed a plasma cutter. "Stay here, interface with the Stray's external sensors. Be my eyes. Tell me where they are." "Elias, your wound is a problem for later," he said, injecting another stimulant into his thigh. His heart hammered and the world snapped into a painfully sharp, vibrating focus. "If there is a later." He cycled the airlock, stepping back into the collapsing tomb of the Odyssey's end. "They are below." Lyrasalis' voice resonated in his mind, clear as a bell. The telepathic link was stronger now, focused. "In the biodomes, the rot sings to them. Vex is with them. He is angry. His song is static and red." Ilias moved, faster this time, his body fueled by stimulants and desperation. He descended into the guts of the derelict, into the vast, spherical habitat that had once held an artificial sky. Now, it was a zero-G forest of petrified trees and flash-frozen, desiccated vines. The air was thick with a rust-colored spore mist. And in the center, in a nest of glowing, fungoid flesh and twisted cables, was the Krell, throne. Vex was not there, he was out hunting. But the throne, it was plugged into the Odyssey's ancient power grid, drinking the last dregs of its fission reactor. And on its side, Ilias saw it, a junction box, a grotesque fusion of Krell biocircuitry and human tech, a universal adapter. "I see it," Ilias whispered into his comms. "I'm going for it." "Be fast," Lyra's voice urged. "Two of them they are, climbing from the maintenance tunnels below you." Ilias dropped from a girder, his mag boots catching the throne's chassis. He ignited the plasma cutter, the hiss of it echoing in the dead forest. He began cutting the adapter from its socket. A high-pitched shriek echoed from below. They'd heard him. "They are coming." Ilias poured power into the cutter, the metal glowing white-hot. The adapter came free in his hand, hot enough to sear his glove. He turned to run, and a Krell burst from a tangle of vines, its rotary saw screaming. Ilias didn't think, he reacted. He was an archivist, he preserved. But now he had to fight. He swung the plasma cutter, still blazing in a low arc. The blade connected with the Krell's biomechanical arm. The saw limb flew off, sparking. The creature shrieked, a sound of static and agony as the superheated plasma cauterized the wound. It stumbled back, its lens eye crackling. "Ilias," Lyra's voice was a mental shout. "Vex, he knows he felt his toy break, he is coming fast." Ilias scrambled up a petrified tree, pushing his aching body to its limit. He could hear Vex's mechanical spider legs, a terrifyingly fast click-click-click, echoing up the chassis of the ship. This was Vex's home. Ilias was an intruder. He burst back into the upper decks, slamming a bulkhead door behind him and welding it shut with the cutter. The thud of Vex's massive form hitting the other side shook the very wall. Ilias ran, stumbling, bleeding, clutching the adapter. He threw himself through the Stray's airlock, sealing it just as Vex's pincer arm smashed the outer panel. "Got it," Ilias yelled, falling into the engineering bay. He was choking on his own blood, the stimulants wearing off, leaving a black abyss of pain. "He is on the hull," Lyra Solis resonated, her voice tight with fear. "He is cutting." "He'll have to wait his turn," Ilias panted. He held the adapter. "Now the hard part." The adapter was not plug-and-play. It was a living, parasitic thing. As soon as Ilias brought it near the broken manifold, tiny metallic flesh tendrils writhed out, sniffing the technology. "It wants to connect," Lyra Solis pulsed. "It senses the core. It hungers." "Guide it," Ilias ordered, his hands slick. "Your resonance, show it where to go. Don't let it feed, make it bridge." Ilias held the adapter in place. Lyra Solis placed her hands over his. The cold of her crystalline skin was a shock, but the focus of her resonance was a tangible force. The Krelltech squirmed. It hated her. The pure mathematical certainty of her Kathur nature was anathema to its chaotic, cancerous design. "Now, Ilias," she pulsed, her own light straining. "It is resisting force. It." Ilias jammed the adapter into the socket. The tendrils lashed out, sinking into the Stray's systems. The lights in the ship flickered. The engine's hum changed. It became guttural, infected. "It's wrong," Ilias said, horrified. "It is working," Lyra countered. "The clot is cleared, the false note is gone, the song is scarred but whole." The ship lurched. On the hull, Vex shrieked as a jolt of power from the newly connected engine surged through the chassis, shocking him. "He is furious." "Let him be," Ilias snarled, dragging himself to the cockpit. He strapped himself in, his body screaming. "It's time to go." He powered the rift drive. The ship vibrated, the black hole core spinning up, the new, ugly, Krell-scarred engine screaming in protest but holding. "The Volcrata," Lyra Solis whispered, strapping in beside him. She was looking out not with sensors but with her mind. "Ilias, it is. Here." Ilias looked at the sensor screen. The icon wasn't approaching. It was here. It had just arrived. "Where?" he yelled, scanning the viewport. "I don't see anything." "You won't," she resonated, her core song poolsing a frantic, terrified white. It is not a ship, it is a hole. Outside the mist-filled graveyard, vanished the wreckage of the Odyssey's end, was gone, the rust-colored nebula was gone. The viewport was black, a perfect, starless, featureless black. The Volcreta scout wasn't in the graveyard was in the Volcreta. The Stray's systems began to fail, not from attack but from entropy. The lights dimmed, the gravity thinned, the very energy was being leached from their ship. A noise. The voice from the Athenaeum. It wasn't in his head this time, it was everywhere, it was the sound of the void itself. The echo, is, loud it, hurts we, are, the cure be, quiet. The ship's power bar was draining, falling from 100% to 80% to 60% in seconds. It's eating us, Ilias whispered, his hands frozen on the controls. The rift, Lyrasalis urged, her own light dimming rapidly, her voice a thread. Ilias, now. But just as Ilias' thumb went for the jump drive, a thing smashed through the viewport. It wasn't the void, it was Vex. The Krell leader, his spider throne mangled, had climbed the ship. In the instant before the quiet ate the light, he had punched his remaining pincer arm through the cockpit glass. The cabin explosively decompressed. Alarms shrieked, then died as the power hit critical. Vex, fueled by a mad, parasitic hatred, was dragging himself inside the cockpit, his one organic eye fixed on Ilias. Mine, Vex shrieked, his voice a burst of static, as the absolute energy-drinking cold of the quiet flooded the cabin. They were trapped, a monster in front, a voidentity around them. The engine was charged, but the controls were dead, the world was vacuum and silence. A cold, absolute stop. The air ripped from Ilias' lungs was the last warm thing in the universe. It froze instantly, a cloud of glittering crystals that scattered and then dulled, as if the very concept of sparkle was being erased. The quiet was not just an enemy, it was an absence. It was the heat death of the cosmos, localized and hungry. Vex was a thing of pure, dying momentum. His pincer arm jammed through the shattered viewport, locked onto the bulkhead. His other, the rotary saw, was dead. His single organic eye was filmed with ice. The entropy field of the Volcreta was killing him, too. He was noise, just as they were. But he was a parasite, and he saw one last, magnificent host, the Rift engine. Mine, he shrieked again, his voice not a sound, but a crackle of static from his dying internal comms. He hauled his half-frozen, half-machine body through the hole, a shower of fractured cockpit glass tumbling with him. Ilias was pinned, his old, wounded body a useless weight. The stimulants were gone, the crash left him trembling and weak. He tried to seal his suit, fumbling at the collar ring, but his fingers were numb, his gloves stiffening with the impossible cold. He was 90 years old. He was an archivist, and he was being murdered by a junkyard monster in the belly of a void god. This is a bad eulogy, he thought, his mind becoming slow, his thoughts thick like cooling tar. Vex raised his pincer, aiming for Ilias' chest, for the Stray's controls just behind him. It is cold, Lyra's voice resonated in his mind. It was no longer a cello, it was the tink of a single, freezing shard of ice. Her core song was a pinprick, a dying sapphire ember in the absolute blackness of the cabin. But she was seeing, not with eyes but with her essence. She saw the Volcreta's field, a perfect, simple, smooth wave of anti-energy. It sucked electricity, it dampened kinesis, it quieted life. And she saw Vex, a chaotic, ugly snarl of parasitic code and biological need. He was all static, all noise. And she saw the Stray's engine. The Volcreta's field was washing over it, and parting like water around a stone. The quiet could not drink the engine because the engine was not energy. It was a law. It was a contained, perfect, heavy silence of its own. It was gravity. The engine was charged. The Krell adapter fused to the manifold was twitching. Its biological components were dying just like Vex, and they were panicked. The controls were dead, yes. The electrical triggers were silenced. But the bridge was still there. A bridge of Kathur resonance, human ingenuity, and Krell parasitism. Ilias, her voice pulsed, a sudden, sharp spike of focus. It cannot eat the core, it fears it only silences the switch. Vex was on him. The pincer slammed down. Ilias threw his arm up, the metal claw crunching into the cheap console next to his head, shattering the dead screen. Ilias was drowning in the void, his lungs burning, his vision narrowing to a single, terrifying point, Vex's single, frozen, hateful eye. Lyra moved. She ignored the cold. She ignored the vacuum. She was a being of pure, logical fractures, and she saw the solution. It was a terrible, illogical, human solution. It was the only way. She lunged from her seat, not toward Vex, but toward the engineering panel behind Ilias, where the Krell adapter was fused to the ship. Lyra, no! Ilias choked out, his voice a soundless gasp, but she heard his mind. You taught me. Noise Ilias Thorn, she resonated, her mind voice suddenly shining with a terrifying, beautiful brilliance. It is not just sound, it is will. Vex, seeing her move, turned, sensing a new threat. He swung his pincer arm back, dislodging it from the console. It is choice, Lyra pulsed. She placed her crystalline hands directly onto the living, writhing, chaotic Krell adapter. For the Krell tech, it was agony. Her pure mathematical resonance was acid. For Lyra, it was defilement. The chaotic, cancerous, selfish code of the Krell biotech flooded her, a wave of filth. But she did not fight it. She overwhelmed it. She became a conduit. A final song. She poured her entire being, her 51 years of lonely travel, her grief for her lost crew, her new, fragile hope, her Kathur soul into the adapter. She became the switch. She pushed her song, her life force, her resonance past the dead electrical triggers, through the parasitic bridge, and into the containment field of the singularity. She shouted at the black hole, and the black hole answered. The effect was not instantaneous. It was a gathering. Vex's arm, swinging toward her, stopped. His frozen eye widened in pure, unadulterated terror. He felt it. The Stray's engine, that heavy, quiet thing, was waking up. Ilias felt it as a lurch in his very bones. The Volcrata's entropy field flickered. The absolute cold retreated a single, terrified inch. The quiet was afraid. It had tried to silence a noise and had just woken up a voice. Jump, Ilias screamed in his mind. Lyra's core song, the sapphire light, exploded. It was no longer a flicker. It became a supernova of fractured, blinding white light that filled the cockpit, a visual representation of her soul igniting. The light was so pure, so loud in its resonance, that it acted as a weapon. Vex shrieked. The Krell-tech that composed his body boiled. The pure, ordered resonance was the antithesis of his parasitic nature. The light burned him. He didn't just die, he disintegrated. His mechanical parts clattered to the floor and his biological components vaporized, his final, static scream silenced by her song. The last thing Ilias saw before the rift tore open was Lyra. She was no longer Kathur. She was light, a blinding, angelic, shattering figure, her crystalline body a prism for a star that had just been born and had just died. Then the universe tore. It was not like the first jump. That had been a violation. This was an ascension. They were not punching through space, they were being sung through it. Ilias felt Lyra's consciousness, not as a voice, but as a presence. He felt her 51 years of hope. He felt the logic of her people, the beauty of her home shard. And he felt her release. It was not a death. It was a translation. The Stray, powered by a Kathur soul and a black hole, didn't just jump. It became the rift. The transition was gentle. Ilias woke with a thud. The ship had landed, not crashed, landed. Silence. The alarms were dead. The engine's hum was gone. The Krell adapter was silent. The ship was utterly, completely dark. The hole in the viewport was a gaping wound, but outside was not the black of the quiet or the rust red of the shoal. It was just space, clean, normal, star-filled space. Lyra, Ilias whispered, his voice hoarse. His suit seal had engaged in the jump, the sudden surge of power giving it one last jolt. He was alive, he could breathe. He turned. The cockpit was a wreck. Vex was gone, save for a few mechanical claws and a pile of ash, and in the co-pilot's seat was her. Lyra Solis was, still, her body was intact, a perfect, multifaceted statue of smoky quartz, but the light was gone. The core song was extinguished. She was just crystal, a beautiful, hollow, dead thing. Her sacrifice had been total. She had burned her very essence to ignite the drive. Ilias unstrapped, his body a map of pain. He stumbled over to her, his hand shaking, reaching out to her featureless face. It was cold, colder than the void. You did it, he whispered, a sob, the first in 53 years, catching in his throat. You saved us, you were the noise. He was alone, again. The last human, now the last survivor, with a dead Kathur for a co-pilot in a dead ship. The engine was inert. The Krell adapter was a smoking, fused lump of slag. Her song had burned it out, too. They were stranded. He sagged against the console, his grief a physical weight, heavier than any gravity. He had come all this way, for this, to be a witness to the last true sacrifice. That's when a light flooded the cockpit. It was blinding, white, and clean. It wasn't the entropic void of the Volcreta or the sickly green of the Krell. It was a searchlight. Ilias shielded his eyes, looking through the hole in the viewport. A ship was out there. No, 3 ships, sleek, silver, and human. They were angular, weaponized, and pristine. They bore a symbol he hadn't seen since he was a child, a symbol from before the Conquered, a single blue sphere, the emblem of Terra. A voice, sharp and clear, crackled over the Stray's ancient, near-dead speakers. It wasn't telepathy. It wasn't static. It was a voice, a human voice. Unidentified vessel, you are in direct violation of Quarantine Protocol 0. You have breached the Chronomos exclusion zone. Power down your... The voice paused, the professionalism cracking for just a half-second, replaced by a stunned, breathless disbelief. My God, we are detecting life, a human life sign. The searchlight focused, pinning Ilias in its beam. He stood, a 90-year-old man covered in blood and suit sealant, next to the crystal statue of his savior in the cockpit of a museum piece. A new voice came over the comms, female, sharp, and full of an authority that chilled him to the bone. This is Admiral Kalen Reyes of the Human Quarantine Fleet. Stand by to be boarded. Do not move. Ilias looked at the fleet, then back at Lyra's silent form. He had found them. He had found humanity. They were not dead. They were not lost. They were the jailers, Part 5. The sound of the Stray's outer airlock cycling was a metallic scream of violation. Ilias didn't move. He stood, his old frame trembling, his hand resting on the cold, silent crystal of Lyrasalis' shoulder. He had faced the void, the parasites, and the entropy gods. He would not flinch from humans. A thud as a maglock engaged on their hull. A hiss as the inner airlock was forced. Then light. Blinding, tactical, clean light flooded the ruined cockpit. On the deck, hands visible now. The voice was filtered, hard, and utterly human. Ilias raised his hands, his blood-caked gloves looking black in the stark white beams. 3 figures entered. They were not people, they were suits. High-tech, pristine white and silver armor sealed against any and all contamination. They moved with a predatory grace, their weapons not projectile, Ilias noted, but resonance emitters trained on his chest. One of them, his armor bearing a Centurion's silver markings, scanned the cockpit. His helmet cam lingered on Vex's ashen remains, on the Krell adapter slag, and finally on Lyra. Target 1 is human, elderly male, wounded. The soldier's voice was flat. Target 2 is Kathur, crystalline, inert, no life song. She's not a target, Ilias rasped, his voice a dry crackle. She's a hero. The soldier didn't respond. He just tagged her statue with a red targeting laser, marking it as salvage. A 4th figure entered, taller. The armor was the same, but the authority was palpable. She stepped into the cockpit, her mag boots clicking with a final, decisive thud. She stopped, and for a long moment the only sound was the failing, ticking of the Stray's dead systems. The Admiral Kalen Reyes. She raised her hands and her helmet retracted, dissolving back into the suit's collar with a whisper of pneumatics. Her face was human, terribly, painfully human. She was in her late 50s, her skin bearing the arctan of artificial suns, her hair pulled back in a severe iron-gray bun, but her eyes were ancient. They were the eyes of a jailer who had watched the same wall for 50 years, and they were furious. Do you have any idea what you have done? Her voice was low, a controlled tremor. I was surviving, Ilias managed. I was the last. You were the Echo, she snapped. You were a museum, you were supposed to be quiet. She took a step closer, her gaze sweeping the devastation. The Kathur, the Rift engine, that. Jump, she pointed a gauntleted finger at the hole in the viewport at the space outside. It wasn't a jump, old man, it was a scream. You just screamed at the top of your lungs, in a graveyard. What? Centurion, Reyes said, not taking her eyes off Ilias. Take him and secure the Stray. I want its drive cord, now. No, Ilias lunged, not at Reyes, but back toward Lyra's statue. You can't, it's all that's left of her. The Centurion was on him in an instant, a thud as his armored hand seized Ilias' shoulder. The grip was gentle, a machine-like, precise, cold gentleness. He was not being arrested, he was being contained. Bring him to the Aegis, Reyes commanded, her helmet sealing. Decon chamber, then, the truth room, I want to know. Why? Ilias was dragged from the stray. He caught one last glimpse of Lyra's form, lit by the red laser of the soldier, a piece of evidence to be catalogued. Then the airlock hissed, and he was in the transition tube. The flagship, the Aegis, was not a ship. It was a city, a world. As he was marched through its pristine, white, silent corridors, he saw people, humans, thousands of them. They were in clean, simple uniforms. They were tending to hydroponic gardens. They were teaching children in class pods. They were living, but it was a sterile life. There was no art. There was no music. There was no loud laughter. It was the life of a monastery, a life dedicated to one principle. Be quiet. He was stripped of his suit, his 90-year-old body scrubbed by needles of sonic energy and mists of antiviral agents. His wounds were sealed by bioweavers. He was given a simple gray tunic, and then he was brought to a room. It was not an interrogation cell. It was a sphere. The walls were pure white. In the center was a single chair. Reyes was there waiting, her armor gone, replaced by a simple black admiral's uniform. Ilias Thorne, she said, her voice echoing in the perfect white space. Archivist, born, Sol year 2198, left. Off-grid at the Athenaeum. You are an accident, a loose thread. Why? Ilias asked, his voice raw. The silence, the galaxy, dying. I thought we were gone. We are gone, Reyes said. Her voice was cold, the voice of a surgeon explaining a necessary amputation. We had to be, we Ilias Thorne, humanity. We are the disease. Ilias stared. What? The quiet, she said, and a holographic projection shimmered to life on the spherical wall. It showed the galaxy. It showed shadows, the Volcrata. You've seen them. Sentient entropy. The eaters of resonance. They are the universe's immune system, and we, our noise, our emotion, our chaos, our FTL travel, our art, our AIs, it was a fever. We were too loud. She zoomed the map. They were waking up. They fed on the conquered, and the loudest, sweetest, most chaotic noise of all was us. We were addictive to them. The more we grew, the faster they ate. So the silence was a choice, Reyes said, her voice breaking for the first time. Grief. A terrible, agonizing choice. We couldn't fight them to fight. Is noise to win? Is noise so? We left. We gathered every human we could. We built these arcs, 1,000 of them. We came here to the Chronomos breach, a pocket of null space we'd prepared, and we turned off. We severed the way lines. We silenced our AIs. We quarantined ourselves from the galaxy to save it. You abandoned them, Ilias whispered, horrified. Lyra's people, the Kathur, they're fatting. Their songs are simplifying, the Xylos are petrifying. Your cure is killing them. Slower, yes, but it's killing them. It was the only way. Reyes slammed her hand on a console. We gave them time. We hoped the quiet would go back to sleep, and for 53 years it worked. The galaxy was fatting but stable until you. She pointed at him. Your little decryption pulse at the Athenaeum. It was a pebble in the pond, but the rift jump, your ship, the stray, powered by that Kathur's soul. Her face was pale. That wasn't a pebble, old man. That was a tidal wave, a song of grief and fusion and hope, the loudest noise the universe has heard in half a century. She turned to the hologram. It was flickering. A stain, a darkness was spreading from a single point, the point where they were. It heard her song, Reyes whispered. It followed her echo. It followed you. You didn't find us, Ilias. You led them right to us. As she spoke, a klaxon blared. Not a sound, a telepathic scream. It was inside his head. It echo found loud feed. The white room flickered, the lights dimming. A deep, subsonic vibration shook the Aegis to its core. Reyes was already moving. All hands, battle stations. Order protocol is in effect. Wardens, project, hold the line. She grabbed Ilias' arm. You wanted to see humanity. Come see what we became. She dragged him to the bridge. It was beautiful, a vast amphitheater of crystal displays. Hundreds of operators sat at their stations, not panicked, but focused. They were meditating. Through the vast main view screen, Ilias saw it. The hole, the wound Lyra had torn, it was bleeding. Shadow, the Volcrata fleet, not a scout, not the few from the Athenaeum, thousands of them, a tide of perfect, sentient darkness pouring into their home. This is the war, Reyes breathed, taking her command chair. We do not fight with noise, we fight with order. Ma'am, a young woman at the tactical helm, the resonance weaver, called out. The quiet is advancing, they are not slowing. Project the song, Reyes ordered. The Aegis hummed a single pure perfect note, a mathematical chord. It was the opposite of Vex's chaos. It was logic, it was order, the entire human fleet. All 1,000 arcs joined the song. It was a telepathic shield of pure reason. It's beautiful, Elias whispered. The shadow lances, the beams of pure entropy, hit the shield. The song wavered, the note flattened. Weaver, report, Reyes barked. They're eating. The order, ma'am, the woman cried. They like it. It's not stopping them. Our logic is just a different flavor to them. Shield at 40%. The bridge dimmed. The operators groaned. They were fatting, their life force being leached by the shield. We can't hold them, Reyes whispered, her face a mask of defeat. We forgot something. We became so logical. We became food. Elias watched. He watched the perfect, ordered song of humanity fail. He watched the chaos of the quiet win. He's thought of Lyra. You're wrong, Elias said, his voice a single human rasp in the dying choir. Reyes looked at him, her eyes dead. It's over. No, Elias roared. The sound was obscene in the quiet bridge. You're fighting wrong. You're singing them a lullaby. You're feeding them logic. He stumbled, ran to the resonance weaver's console. What did they fear? He panted, gripping the console. Not you, not your order. They feared her. They feared the rift engine. They feared chaos. He's right, the weaver whispered, her eyes wide. The entropy wave fractured when it hit the Cathur's death song. I saw it. We dampened all of it, Reyes said, horrified. Our art, our history, our passion. It's forbidden noise. It's not noise, Elias said, his hands flying over the console. The archivist awakened. It's in your archives, the legacy protocol. You saved it. You, humans, you save everything. He found it, a locked file, legacy archive, forbidden. Admiral, Elias yelled. They are here. They are eating your peace. It's time to show them war. Reyes looked at the dying shield, at the advancing darkness. She made her choice. Do it, she whispered. All arcs, Elias roared. Into the mastercoms, his voice breaking. With 90 years of silence, disengage, order, engage, legacy, broadcast, everything now. The hum stopped. For a single beat, there was silence. Then, the Aegis exploded, not with force but with sound. It was a Beethoven symphony. It was a pre-silenced guitar solo. It was Armstrong on the moon. It was Martin Luther King dreaming. It was a billion human arguments. It was opera. It was poetry. It was laughter. It was grief. It was humanity, undiluted, unfiltered, chaotic. It was noise. HURTS, HURTS, HURTS. The telepathic scream changed. It was no longer hungry. It was afraid. The shadows recoiled. The pure mathematical entropy could not process the illogical passion. It wasn't food. It was poison. It was acid. The human fleet was no longer a choir. It was a riot. Elias stood at the viewport, his fists clenched, tears streaming down his face. He watched the darkness burn. He looked at the stray floating nearby, caught in the fleet's light. He looked at Lyra's statue in the cockpit. And as the symphony hit its crescendo, a billion voices screaming, I am. He saw it. A flicker. Inside her crystal form, a tiny pinprick of sapphire light, an echo of her own joining the noise. The Volcrata broke. They fled. They panicked, tearing at spacetime, scrambling back into the rift, desperate to escape the beautiful, terrible noise. The rift snapped shut. The music stopped. The bridge was silent but for the sound of weeping. Reyes stood up, her face shattered. We forgot, she whispered. We were so afraid of being the monster. We forgot how to be human. Elias turned from the window. He was shaking. They weren't the quiet he breathed. We were. A new alarm, a soft, gentle chime. The resonance weaver looked up, her eyes wide with awe. Admiral Elias, she whispered, the legacy broadcast. It didn't stop at the breach, the way lines. She pointed to the galactic map. It was dark. Then a light, a single light, the old Xylos network. Then another, the Nautilide exchange. One by one, a web of light spreading across the galaxy, the way lines dead for 53 years, igniting like a fuse. The galaxy was not fading. It was waking up. The silence that fell on the bridge of the Aegis was a different kind of quiet. It was not the hollow, oppressive order of the quarantine. It was not the hungry, entropic void of the Volcrata. It was the silence of a held breath, the silence of awe. The billion voices of the legacy broadcast had faded, but the light remained. On the main view screen, the galactic map was no longer a static, dark field marked with the red thread of the quiet. It was a living, breathing web of incandescent blue. The way lines, dormant for half a century, were on. They pulsed with a steady, vibrant life, a cardiovascular system returning to a body once pronounced dead. The bridge crew, the weavers and wardens, as Elias had learned they were called, were unmoored. They were staring, their faces, so long trained into masks of placid control, now broken open by an emotion their protocol had no name for. It was a terrifying, ecstatic confusion. Admiral Kaylin Reyes stood by her command chair, her hands gripping its armrests, her knuckles white. She was not looking at the map. She was looking at Elias. "They're on," she whispered, the words sounding alien in her own mouth. "The way lines, they were keyed to our legacy. We built them, and we unlocked them with music." She shook her head, a slow, disbelieving motion. 53 years of silence, of logic. We let the Kathur fade. We let the Xylos petrify. We were tending a garden by withholding the sun. "You thought you were the sun," Elias said, his voice gentle. He was exhausted, his old body aching, but his mind was clear. "You thought your light was fire. You were wrong. You are the pulse." He pointed to the map. "You didn't just scare them away, Admiral. You sent out a cure. You sent noise. You sent life." As if summoned by his words, the resonance weaver's console chimed. It was a soft, melodic sound, a sound so different from the sterile tones of the Aegis that everyone flinched. "Ma'am," the weaver said, her voice trembling, I'm receiving something. It's not us. It's coming through the way line from the home shard, Kathira." Reyes was at her side in an instant. "Is it the quiet?" "No, ma'am," the weaver wept, her fingers flying over her crystal console. "It's them. It's Kathur." She routed the signal not to a speaker, but to the telepathic resonance projector, the same one that had broadcast their logic. A song filled the bridge. It was not the smooth, perfect, dying logic of the Kathur that Lyra had grieved. It was shattered, it was chaotic, it was dissonant and beautiful. It was 1,000 Kathur core songs, fracturing, reforming, and exploding, with new colors of emotion. It was a species remembering how to feel. It was grief and rage and a terrible soaring joy. It was the sound of a renaissance. Elias closed his eyes, his hand unconsciously moving to his chest. Lyra, her final song, had found its choir. "They're awake," Elias breathed. "Patch it through to the fleet," Reyes commanded, her voice thick. "Patch everything through. Let them hear it." Another chime. "Admiral, the Xylos network of biopulse, the great trees, their petrification is revering. The data stream is corrupted, but it feels like growth." Another. "The Nautilide gas cities, their energy signatures are returning. They're relighting." The bridge was a chorus of miracles. The stars that had fallen were rising. One by one, the civilizations that humanity had quarantined were igniting, brought back from the brink by the very noise humanity had tried to suppress. Reyes turned to Elias, her face a mask of terrible, profound, humbling realization. The title of your archive, Elias, that video title I saw in your data log. When humanity left, the stars fell, Elias quoted, his voice thick. The galaxy went quiet as the truth unfolded, Reyes finished. She looked at the map, alive with light. The truth is that we are the keystone, we are the noise that holds the arch. Together our chaos is the complexity that defines sentience, and we left, we hid, we let the galaxy die of simplicity. She straightened. The jailer was gone, the admiral remained, but she was different. Weaver, she said, her voice ringing with a new purpose, open a fleet-wide broadcast, visual and audio, all 1,000 arcs. Yes, Admiral. Her face appeared on 1,000,000 screens throughout the quarantine fleet, in the hydroponics, in the class pods, in the sterile white corridors. This is Admiral Reyes. For 53 years I have enforced order protocol. I have taught you that our nature is a sin, that our passion is a plague, that our purpose is to be quiet. She paused, taking a deep human breath. Today I tell you that I was wrong. We were wrong. A visible shockwave passed through the fleet.